I love Paul. He's so to the point, and his words are so rich. Again, he's talking about marriage in these verses, but he goes well beyond that. He's telling us really how Christians are to live in the world. And again, it's in that context of, hey, don't be so concerned with all the things that could distract you in this world. Be concerned and get ready and live as if Jesus is coming back today. Now, I know with our current context, that's been a discussion I've heard many Christians have. You just look around and there's all kinds of signs that Jesus is going to come back any minute now. You know, we could go and unpack the scripture in the context of marriage. We could unpack it in the context of end times, but I think it's in context today of preparation, of not letting ourselves be distracted. Now, I don't know about you, but my day is full of distractions. In fact, I read somewhere that because I'm a man, I am much more susceptible, let's say, to being drawn away from the distractions of the world. We all hear that our girlfriends and wives and that the fair gender, so to speak, the females, they're able to do something that males cannot do. Multitask. Now, I would argue that I could multitask, but it looks a little bit messy when I try it. I mean, men sort of have a little... I got an amen on that? Oh, man. That was my girlfriend, by the way, for you at home. So, anyway, I've heard that men tend to be a little bit more on the ADHD spectrum of how to live life. And I've been accused of that too, and I just say, well, of course I'm all kind of scatterbrained and all this. It's just because I'm a genius. I've got a lot of things on my mind. I'm getting some woos and some shoosh and some head nods and all kinds of body language out there. I'm not sure if I have a true perception of myself, but you know, the fact is that a lot of guys kind of have this ADHD thing, and they rely on their significant other, their girlfriends or their spouses, their wives, to take care of things for them, to kind of watch over. And you know that's the case, right? Because there was one instance, this particular gentleman was so distracted by one thing and then another thing that he had to tell his wife had to tell him everything, almost everything, and what to do and what time it was and where they were supposed to be. And one day he had told his wife that he needed to find a sweater. And so she was busy in the other room and she was looking for the sweater, and he was just busy watching TV. I'm sure it was pregame for the football or something. Anyway, so he's watching TV and his wife comes back in and says, "Good news, honey, I found your sweater." And he says, "Well, are we going somewhere or am I just cold?" That's as good as it gets. You know, he was distracted by the television and all the things that were going on. I don't know, 100 different thoughts, but it's funny how close to home that can hit sometimes, isn't it? You don't have to be just a guy. You can be a girl and the same thing happens to you. I mean, how many times have you walked into a room and then just kind of stood there and go, now what was I after? What did I come up here for? I mean, I know that's my method. I did that the other day. I was looking for my keys and I went upstairs and forgot I was looking for my keys. So distractions are something that we all have to deal with, and it's hard to remain focused a lot of times. We chase rabbits all day long. We forget what we're doing in the middle of things, and sometimes we let those distractions dictate the direction of our day or our lives, don't we? You know, I can remember early on in ministry, I used to sit down, you know, every morning and map out the day. Okay, I've got to do this and I've got to do that, and this needs to be accomplished, and I have a nice list of things that I needed to get done for that day. Who to call, who to visit, what to plan for, what to study for. Anyway, I'd come into the office, and inevitably within 5 to 10 minutes, the phone would ring, and all of a sudden that was the mark of the distractions. Then all of a sudden it was responding to the urgent or the immediate rather than all those nice little 5 things that were on my list to get done. And at the end of the day, I was frustrated. I was frustrated because it seemed like maybe on a good day, one thing got done on that list. But the rest of the day, I was so distracted in responding that I didn't get accomplished what I really needed to get accomplished. I had lost focus. I had allowed myself to respond to whatever fire was needed to be put out rather than to take control over my day and my schedule. And we all know that, right? I mean, the phone rings, something, you get an email, you get caught up. How many of you have lost time on Facebook or social media? You know, you're going through there and you're responding to your grandkids' pictures or your something, or maybe you're posting, all of a sudden somebody's posted an article and you get reading the article, and the next thing you know, that leads to another article at the end, and before you know it, you're all caught up. Or some of us get caught up in checking the weather or the stock market. You know, well, what's the weather going to do? Is it going to rain? What's my stock doing? How's my 401k? And we get wrapped up into all of that. And before you know it, we're distracted. Or maybe you get distracted when you turn on the TV and it says, the University of Tennessee once again announces that they need a new football coach. That seems to be about a bi-yearly thing. Or maybe it's just catching up on the news. And then you've got all the other stuff that you do. You got to drop the kids off. You got to go to the church to do this. You got to clean this. You got to repair that. The honey-do list is waiting. And then there's all kinds of other stuff that needs to be done. There's that whole stack of books and things that you've always meant to read, but you just haven't got around to. And even the list that you make to get the things done becomes a distraction. The problem is, everything then seems important, doesn't it? It seems necessary, and we get caught up in the moment rather than being in control and being in focus. We spend too much time focused on what the necessary is, and we neglect what's essential in our lives. I think Paul gives us some insight into this when he talks about and reminds us that things are passing away here. That we don't just live in this world. We're in this world, but we're not of this world. Our minds, our hearts, our lives should be set in a direction that's different because of who we follow in Jesus. We ought to go by a different roadmap. We ought to go by a different schedule. And I think there's 3 things that we can look at. Do you have passion in your life? Are you focused? And does your life have purpose or significance? So those are the 3 things that we're going to talk about. Passion, focus, and purpose. You know, the first thing, passion. I can remember, it sort of goes back to the days, a normal day in our schedule, right? We get caught up in the necessary. We get caught up in what we could do or what we would do instead of what we should be doing. In other words, we get kind of pragmatic about life, kind of practical and logical. We have to deal with these things that come into our day and our schedule, but what's the price that we're paying for that? You know, for me, a more practical way to look at life is to get more rest. That's the pragmatic way of life. The passionate way of life would be, you know, I could turn the TV off a little earlier in the nighttime, get up a little earlier and spend those first few minutes in extra devotion time and extra prayer. Now, the practical thing might tell us that, you know, the world's an interesting place and you got to get along and you don't want to rock the boat. So maybe it's not so important, this issue that we face in the world, or this issue that the news is putting out there, or this issue at work, or this issue in our family. And so what do? We take the pragmatic way and we compromise rather than take a stand. Maybe it's just easier to go along with what everybody else is doing and thinking than to be different and to have that biblical mindset, that Christian mindset, that worldview that says, yeah, we're in the world, but we're not really of the world. Maybe it just seems more practical to just, again, to meet the demands of life and the hectic schedule than to have the courage to really look at our lives and say, well, do I really need to be doing this? Could I be spending my time better doing that? The answer to that is not to take the path of least resistance and to be pragmatic about life and to compromise or to take the easy way, to take the wide road, but to take the narrow path, to discover what the passion is in your life, in your heart. What sets you on fire in the morning? What gets that foot out of the bed so that you're ready to face whatever the day has in store? I heard something interesting. We were talking in the office, and Susan Gamble said, every morning when I get out of bed, I make a choice. I make a choice to choose joy. Wow. What if that were our passion, joy and gratitude? To count our blessings rather than all the things that discourage us and get in our way. Because without passion, let's face it, we're just like a ship tossed here and back and forth, here and there by the winds and by the waves. Without passion, there's nothing that burns in our hearts and gets us excited about life itself. What are your goals? What's driving you? What's captured your life and set it on fire? I hope it's something that deals with God. I hope it's something, that passion that you have is to help other people, to draw as close as you can in your relationship with Jesus Christ, to know with Him and to trust Him and to love Him deeper each and every day. If you have that and you allow the Holy Spirit to ignite your hearts and set you ablaze, just think how much different your life would be and how different your family would be, how different your workplace would be, how different this community would be, how different this world would be. If we all allowed the passion of Jesus Christ to burn in our hearts. If instead of just sitting in the pew and getting our punch on our get into heaven card, that we actually lived it out with a passion, with an overwhelming desire, with a relentless pursuit in the will of God, for the will of God in our lives. What if? Paul has passion, doesn't he? And he's asking you, do you have the passion it takes to live the life that God has set before you? Or are you just going to compromise and get along to go along and be pragmatic? Don't rock the boat. You got two choices, right? You rock the boat or you get out of the boat. I think we should get out of the boat. Well, the second point is then we got to be focused. If you want to do something for God, if you want to do something for the kingdom, if you want to make a difference in life, if you want your life to have meaning and purpose, you got to be focused, right? We all know that. When I was an athlete, it was all about, I'd sit down at the beginning of the year, I'd list out all the goals for all the different events that I would swim that year. And I'd make an intentional effort to do things that help me to get to that goal. I'd make sure I was on time for practice. I'd make sure I ate right. I'd make sure I got enough sleep. My whole life was single-mindedly focused on making sure I did everything that I could to meet those goals. You know, Paul loves that athletic language, but let me just throw this into context of what's going on right now. Not in the world, with me. So for Christmas, I got this thing. You can't buy them in the store anymore. You got to order them online. And it was this painting set. You all know, you heard of that guy Bob Ross, right? I'm growing an afro, by the way. It's going to take a while, but just so you know. And if you saw my Facebook page, I'm going to have an afro and a monkey tail beard. Look it up. So anyway, I get this painting set, and I'm determined I'm going to learn how to paint. I've always liked art, but it's kind of like what I talked about before. You know, there's so many things I could do and I want to do that it gets in the way of actually sitting down and practicing and doing art. So I've done a couple paintings, but you know, along the way, I have discovered that I just can't decide, I'm going to paint a landscape today. And you know, so I go over to the easel. Oh, there's a happy little tree that lives here. If you know Bob Ross, and you get that. And maybe in your world, there's a happy tree here. And remember, there's no accidents. There are no mistakes. There's just happy little accidents. I don't know. He's got this whole thing. But what I've discovered is that you got to practice. I mean, I'm watching YouTube videos, and I'm painting happy little trees off to the side, and I'm trying to figure out, well, how's that mountain thing work? And, you know, if I put a happy little stream here, or a little bush here, or a little bush, how's that all work? And, you know, half the time, I'm just making a mess. I've discovered that I like to overwork things. I like to overthink things. Tammy's always yelling at me when I'm painting along, and I go, "Arr!" And she goes, "It's supposed to make you happy, honey." But I'm focused right now on painting. So I'm doing everything I can to make the best painting that I can. You know, the same thing has to happen in our Christian lives. What we focus on is how we're going to live our lives, right? If we focus on being just a kind of a part-time Christian, hope I get to heaven kind of Christianity, where we practice cheap grace and we do works in order to earn righteousness, and we try to be a good person because surely God will let us in then. Instead of really actively pursuing and being focused on our growth as Christians to getting to know Jesus more, well, I mean, there's kind of different outcomes to that life, right? I mean, if you're just going through the motions and you're not really focused in on your spiritual life, how can we expect the fullness of God's riches and blessings and glory to unfold in our lives? I mean, let's get it down to the brass tacks of it all. I mean, Scripture says, you know, that some will come knocking at the door or praying to Jesus, and he'll say, "Who are you?" That's a bad paraphrase, but you get the point. We got to be focused. We got to be passionate. We got to be focused, and then we got to live on purpose. Living on purpose. In other words, those distractions can't pull us away from what's most important in our lives, what we're passionate about. We've got to let go. There's a lady, she was a violinist, and she said something. She came up with coined this phrase, planned neglect. Planned neglect. You ever heard that term? Well, it doesn't mean that you just neglect things that are necessary in your life, but you plan your life in a way in which you prioritize things a little bit differently in your life. You know what this violinist said? Her name's Dorothy something or other. I can't pull it up right now. No, what's my password? Her name is Dorothy Hankins, and she was a concert violinist. And what she found was, she'd get out of bed, and as soon as her feet hit the floor, she'd be just off to the races. All right, got to get the kids up, got to get them dressed, got to get breakfast on the table, got to get them to the school bus stop, got to get them lunches packed, got to do this, got to do that, got to do this, got to do that. And then, maybe by about 1, 2 o'clock, I can practice my violin. Now, planned neglect that she coined was, okay, these things are important, but I'm a concert violinist. I need that practice time. So what am I going to do to rearrange my schedule? What am I going to do to reprioritize my life so that it reflects my true value, my true purpose, my true meaning? You got to feed the kids, you got to get them up, you got to get them to school, but how do you do that in your schedule? So she planned neglect. She didn't neglect her kids. She didn't say, cereal's in the cupboard, milk's in the fridge. Good luck. Have a nice day. No, she didn't do that. She took care of those responsibilities. But let me just boil it down to this. You know, one of the most amazing things, again, thank you for the blessing of some time off this year, recently. Most of you know I took about a month off and some things happened, but I found myself surrounded by people who allowed me to be me, to take a deep breath, to slow down, to become passionate once again, to renew my focus, and to understand that the purpose that I'm living for is to glorify God in all things. But I was doing everything contradictory to what I just said. My passion was burned out. I was tired, worn out, relying on other things to kind of be refreshed that weren't really good things. I'd lost my focus. Sure, I was kind of going through to get along and, all that good stuff. And I forgot my purpose. So I planned a little bit of neglect in my life. And what I found was with this group of friends that I met was every morning we would start out with a devotion. Now, I've done that in the past. I've started my day out with prayer. I've started my day out with devotion. But if you're like me, what happens? It goes back to the beginning of the message, doesn't it? You jump out of bed and you're immediately thinking, it's going to be a big day. I've got to get these 15 things done. And like yesterday, they're already overdue. So what if we lived our life with purpose and re-examined our priorities? Well, that's what happened. And all of a sudden, every morning we were doing a devotion. Every day wasn't packed full of demands and pressures. There was time to breathe and to relax. There was time to process things about life and my faith journey and my own journey of life. Personal journey. What a great time that was. But it's so different from what I'm living today, what you're living today, because we don't take that time to just rearrange things so that the most important things, the next big thing, or the big thing stays the big thing, and everything else falls in line after that. As a Christian, your big thing is to glorify God in all that you do, right? To love God, to love your neighbor as yourself. That's a purpose. That's a plan. But if we're caught up in the rat race, we've let our passion kind of smolder out and fade out, we've lost our focus, then it's hard to live with purpose. Church, we need to live with purpose. Think how much different your day. Let me challenge you with one little thing. How much different would your day be if the first thing you did in the morning, the first big thing, was to take time and start with God's Word? How would your day be different? I bet it'd be a lot different, because the foundation would start off at a new place. Just try it. So today, the challenge is to renew your passion if you've lost it, to find your focus if you've been distracted, and to live with purpose. So I'll leave you with this question. Does the way you're living your life right now truly reflect who you are as a follower of Jesus Christ and the goals and the dreams that you have for this life?